This image shows protesters trying to topple Andrew Jackson's statue in Lafayette Square outside the White House on June 22, 2020. It's what I'm drawing today. Protesters climbed the statue and tied ropes around it, then tried to pull it off its pedestal. Tensions are high and have been high for some time regarding the issue of Confederate monuments and other controversial figures. The removals have been driven by the concept that the monuments continue to glorify white supremacy, memorialize an unrecognized government whose founding principle was the perpetuation of slavery, and so on. Right now, one of the most prominent Confederate monuments, the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond, Virginia, has been slated for removal. I actually agree on what Robert E. Lee said on the issue. He opposed Confederate monuments. "I think it wiser," the retired military leader wrote about a proposed Gettysburg Memorial in 1869, "not to keep the open sores of war, but to follow the examples of those nations who endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife, to commit to oblivion the feelings engendered." The author of the Lee biography, The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, explained that Lee believed countries that erased visible signs of civil war recovered from conflicts quicker. He was worried that by keeping such symbols alive, it would keep the divisions alive. Many people come to the defense of monuments and argue that they are there to help us remember. But, as Lee believed, this is not an appropriate way to remember. Lee wanted one form of memorial: headstones in cemeteries. He wrote in 1866, "All I think that can now be done is to protect the graves and mark the last resting places of those who have fallen. Let us not forget that those who fought for the South were traitors who lost the war and were on the wrong side of history." These monuments were put up as a campaign to rebrand the Southern cause of the Civil War as just, and their installments were explicit symbols of white supremacy. They served not to tell a story of those oppressed and ignored, but to send a message. Some worry that the removal of such statues will lead to a slippery slope, and ask questions of when we can draw the line. In reality, it is simple for us to recognize which individuals deserve to be honored in such a way. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had slaves, and some worry that they may be removed as well, if we should go so far as to do that. But that's not the main focus. There is a great difference between those people who helped build our country and those who sought to destroy it. For example, one controversial statue of President Theodore Roosevelt was controversial because of the presentation of the monument, featuring Roosevelt on horseback, flanked by two men, one Native American and one African. It had been criticized as a symbol of racism and colonialism. It depicts Black and Indigenous people as racially inferior. Andrew Jackson is someone who supported and profited from slavery as well as his cruelty to Native Americans. The removal of monuments like these sparks hate. Let us not forget the incident in Charlottesville when the city planned to remove a statue of Robert E. Lee. Again, the man himself was against such monuments. It was not historians who came to protest, but rather it was a flock of white supremacists and neo-Nazis. They brought hate. On August 12, 2017, during the Unite the Right rally, clashes broke out between supporters of the statue, who marched under Confederate, American, and Revolutionary flags, and shouted slogans including "Jews will not replace us," and counter-protesters. During the rally, counter-protester Heather Heya was killed and 19 injured by a car ramming attack. A monument adored by white supremacists and leads to such violence should not have a place in our society.